Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed the agreement but warned strikes on Beirut would go ahead if Hezbollah does not stop attacking our cities and civilians. Netanyahu said that he had told President Trump that Israel would attack terror targets in Beirut if Hezbollah did not cease its attacks on Israeli cities. Earlier on Monday, Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz ordered the Israeli military to attack terrorist targets in the southern suburbs of Beirut following Hezbollah's repeated violations of ceasefire. After Monday's warning, tensions remain high in southern Lebanon, where conflict persists despite the ceasefire announcement. Israeli airstrikes overnight on southern Lebanon left 6 people dead, including a Syrian citizen in a village near the city of Nabatea. The Israeli military, meanwhile, said that the Air Force had intercepted 2 projectiles launched from Lebanon towards Israeli territory, as well as a suspicious aerial target in the area where Israeli soldiers are operating in southern Lebanon. The military said no injuries were reported. And DDNA correspondent Akshay Dongre joins us now for more on this story. Akshay, there was a recent escalation followed by what appears to be a fragile US-backed understanding between Israel and Hezbollah to reduce hostilities. Could you put that into perspective for us?
Well, Munmun, yes, you're absolutely right. There have been escalations even after this fragile ceasefire that has been so much hyped as the end of conflict and probably the end of the decade-old problem that the US and Israel have had with Iran. However, it has been fragile. Yes, you have rightly mentioned that there have been attacks. There has been an attack on a radar facility in Iran by the US forces, and in retaliation, even the IRGC have fired some missiles and drones at the US military base where the US personnel are staying in Kuwait. So that marked a limited but very dangerous escalation as far as the end of hostilities are concerned. Now, remembering all of these, ceasefire can be a triggering point for renewed hostilities and the complete breakdown of any kind of peace deal or any kind of ceasefire if there is a loss of personnel, especially if there is a loss of US Army personnel there at the US bases. But the missiles and drones reportedly have been intercepted. They were intercepted and they were destroyed before they could do any significant damage on the ground. But the message was absolutely clear that the Iran will not hesitate from resuming back the hostilities if the US pressurizes Iran after a certain extent. Now, we are already in the phase where the talks are happening, where negotiations are taking place, and every party would want to extract as much as possible in these last moments just before the ceasefire is signed, so that they can go back to the domestic audience and talk about a victory as far as this conflict is concerned. Now, US also has midterm elections. Donald Trump would want as much as a momentum as far as politically before the ceasefire comes into place. But similar is going to be the idea of the Iranian leadership as well, that has also been seeing a lot of opposition to their fundamental ideas by the domestic population of Iran, and any kind of vacuum is going to create a lot of problem for the Iranian government after the conflict ends and the ceasefire begins.
Right. Could Iran's threat to activate other fronts, including the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, also become a reality if fighting in Lebanon intensifies?
Well, there is always a likelihood of Bab el-Mandeb becoming another collateral as far as these conflicts are concerned. However, we have to take into account that while the Strait of Hormuz is right next to Iran, to close Bab el-Mandeb, you will need the help of countries like Yemen. Saudi Arabia is just around the corner, so it's highly unlikely that Saudi Arabia is going to allow anything like that from happening. Plus, if Bab el-Mandeb is closed, there is going to be a renewed pressure on the oil prices, the trade volume that passes through that strait as well, and there can be more international pressure coming in. But you can never rule out, if the things go out of hand, that can also be an area of more pressure by Iran and the Iranian proxies that are operating in the area, in Lebanon and in other parts of the region, from targeting the ships passing through that narrow route as well, and that can put immense pressure on the global economy as such if the trade from that strait is impacted as well.
Also, Akshay, are current ceasefire violations the result of local commanders acting independently, or do they reflect a breakdown of the agreement at the political level?
Well, it seems this to be sort of an attempt by both the sides to get as much as leverage possible just before the ceasefire is done. Another bargaining chip, another show of strength that both the sides are equally potent in inflicting damage to the other side. If had it been local level commanders who would have acted against the regime, if the Iranian government, for example, there would have been an official statement, or perhaps there would have been some sort of internal action at least on the commanders, because the country is actually at an active war situation, and any kind of local commanders at local level acting on their own can actually show a complete breakdown of control by the Iranian government over its forces as well as its proxies. So that seems an unlikely situation, though it's not impossible. Second is politically whether this sort of shows a kind of a breakdown. That is also unlikely at this point in time, because the regime is acting very decisively and very calculatively. So everything is happening in a manner to attain as much as possible from these last days and last moments ahead of the ceasefire. So these always will be there as one of the biggest tests of the entire this transition period, where where both the sides would want to show their strength and come onto the negotiation table from the point of strength, instead of talking about just preventive actions or defensive actions. Everyone wants to show strength and gain as much as possible for their own political benefits as well.
We leave it at that. Akshay Dongre reporting on the situation in West Asia.